Hello, York. It is so great to be back and to be a part of Yvonne Morley-Chisholm's remarkable research project. Now, I've got a lot of information to get through today in a very short space of time, so I'm going to be using notes if that's all right, because I don't want to miss anything. So I'm going to be talking about Richard's character and personality. Okay, so an important part of the Voice for Richard project has been the analysis of Richard's character and personality. As you will discover later, a person's personality affects the way we speak. With our short time today, this examination will consider what we know about Richard III from the contemporary descriptions written during his lifetime as Duke and King. We'll be examining what people said or wrote about him, publicly and privately, and whether the individuals concerned knew or had met him. We'll also briefly consider Richard's actions during his lifetime, because what people do tells us who they are and what is important to them, their values. So before we begin, it's important we understand what we mean by character and personality. Character is defined as the mental and moral qualities distinctive to an individual. Personality is the combination of characteristics or qualities that form an individual's distinctive character. We'll be considering all surviving descriptions from Richard's lifetime. These are Archibald Whitelaw, Archdeacon of the Lothians in Scotland; Nicolaus von Poplau, a Silesian envoy from the Holy Roman Emperor; Domenico Mancini, an Italian cleric writing for the French government; Thomas Langton, Bishop of St. David's; John Rouse, a Warwickshire priest; Pietro Carmeliano, an Italian immigrant poet in London; and of course, the inhabitants and mayor and aldermen of the city of York. So we'll begin with Archibald Whitelaw. So the most detailed I'm going to go back. We have clicked on. Okay, that's better. Sorry, I'm trying to do about 4 things at once here, and I'm not really good at this juggling. Okay, so the most detailed public description of Richard comes from a 30-minute speech delivered by Archibald Whitelaw, Archdeacon of the Lothians, and it's as part of negotiations for a peace treaty between England and Scotland on the 12th of September 1484 at Nottingham. The address was delivered in Richard's presence. Now, we have to be extremely careful when considering any public descriptions of Richard, and certainly any given in his presence. We can be sure that Whitelaw, as an ambassador of the Scottish king, would have wished to flatter Richard, and indeed this was part of its format. Whether as a representative of the church, he also attempted to document as honest a record of what he knew or had heard about the English king, we cannot know. Whitelaw reveals to Richard that he had performed a similar Scottish ambassador's role to Richard's father, the Duke of York, 25 years earlier at successful negotiations in Ireland. There's no evidence to suggest that Whitelaw had known Richard or had met him prior to the events at Nottingham. So what did the Scottish Archdeacon reveal about Richard that he was happy to deliver in public and in front of the king and court? Whitelaw said the following, and please remember that this was to flatter. Now we'll get to the right stage. Okay. Of all sovereigns I have known, you stand out as the greatest. The renown of your nobility. your celebrated reputation for the practice of every form of virtue which has reached into every corner of the world. The outstanding humanity of your innate benevolence, your clemency, your liberality, your good faith, your supreme justice, and your incredible greatness of heart. Your wisdom, you make yourself at ease with important individuals, but courteous to the common people too. Your moral and heroic virtue. Never before has nature dared to encase in a smaller body such spirit and such strength. In his small body, the greatest valor held sway. Your mild and clement temper. Nicolaas van Poplo. We will now consider the most detailed description of Richard from a private record. This comes from a diary written by Nicolaas van Poplo, a Silesian envoy from Frederick III, the Holy Roman Emperor. Poplo visited King Richard and his court in York on the 1st to the 5th of May, 1484, spending 4 days with the king. In his private diary, Poplo recorded the following. His Majesty the King generously accepted all of my official letters with pleasure and goodwill. After the king read them, he came to me, took me by the hand, and led me with him. With almost dulcet words, the king would do for me all I desired, for his regard of my scholarliness and my eloquence. He addressed me no less than 3 times, as was the common way in England, using the words, "I bid you welcome, and be welcome to me." When I left the king, he had his noblemen and chamberlains accompany me to my lodgings. The day after, the king sent a nobleman to me for coming to his church. There I listened to the loveliest music I ever heard in my entire life, the voices of such purity. And on meeting Richard in the king's private tent, Poplo added, the king had on a collar of gold that led over his shoulder to his back, and from there under his right arm. To look into his Majesty's face and acknowledge all his renowned virtues. He did not eat much of the food, instead conversed with me all the time. He asked me about the imperial majesty, all kings and princes of the empire, well known to me, about manners, habits, pleasures, behavior, and virtues. I then gave him answer about them, all much to their praise and honor. After that, the king remained silent for a while. Later, he once again asked me questions about many things and events. When Poplo informed the king about the defeat of the Turkish invasion of Europe, Richard responded, "Only with the help of my people, I would not only fight back the Turks, but all of my foes and opponents. O dearest God, I recognized and found a truly magnanimous Lord in this king." Later, when given a gift by the king, Poplo thought to return it, recording Richard's response as, "If I desired his graciousness so much, I should accept his generous reverence towards me and not reject it. Therefore I thanked the king and finally accepted it, holding the honor in higher esteem than the value." Poplo added, The king gave to me 50 gold coins, which I gave back to him, refusing to take it. Then the king was very moved, sent it back to me, and asked me if I was of kingly or princely blood, to refuse his donation. And I answered that I had not refused his majesty's gifts and donations because of disregard, but because of my honor. He then sanctioned me with strong words, urging me to take it, and Poplo accepted the gift. King Richard is a high-born prince, 3 fingers taller, but a little slimmer and not so thick-set as me, also much thinner. He has slender arms and thighs, also a big heart. And later, after visiting the French king and court, with the pretender Henry Tudor present, Poplo recorded the rumour there that Richard had had the 2 sons of King Edward IV put to death, so that he himself could be crowned. Poplo added that, "Many say, and I count myself among them, that they still live and are kept in a secret place." Poplo recorded no disapproving comments about King Richard or his court in his private diary, although he recorded a number of significantly negative comments about other monarchs, their nobles and courts, which he had visited. Domenico Mancini. Domenico Mancini was an Italian cleric who visited London in late 1482 to just prior to the coronation of Richard III in early July 1483. His account of the English court was written for the French government towards the end of 1483. He was reluctant to put pen to paper as he couldn't verify his information. He recorded what he had heard. His account is deeply negative about Edward IV and his court, and at times contradictory about Richard. As far as is known, Mancini had no contact with anyone at Edward IV or Richard's court and inner circle. He may have met a foreign doctor in service for Edward IV's eldest son. Mancini recorded the following about Richard. We're going to go back. So, Richard was not merely impelled by ambition and lust to rule, but also provoked. He was unable to dissimulate so well, but that he was heard to say that one day he would avenge his brother's death. By his good offices and dispensing of justice, he set himself to win the loyalty of his people, and outsiders he attracted in large measure by the high reputation of his private life and public activities. Such was his renown in warfare that whenever anything difficult and dangerous had to be done on behalf of the realm, it would be entrusted to his judgment and his leadership. With these arts, Richard obtained the goodwill of the people. The people who, having previously favoured the Duke Richard in their hearts and from their belief in his integrity, now mounted support for him openly. And in recording the contents of a letter written by Richard, which Mancini had apparently heard about, Richard had said that no man but he alone had such concern for the welfare of King Edward and the security of the realm. Some, however, who understood his ambition and his arts always questioned the ends and his measures would bring about. And Mancini ended with, "No one survived of the royal line save Richard, Duke of Gloucester, who by law was entitled to the crown, and by virtue of his ability could bear its burden of responsibilities. His past career and blameless morals were the surest pledge of his good governance, and though he would refuse such a burden, yet he might change his mind if asked by the Lords. Thomas Langton, Bishop of St. David's. On or around the 15th of September 1483, Thomas Langton, Bishop of St. David's, recorded the following description of Richard in a private letter to his friend William Selling, the prior of Christ Church Cathedral, Canterbury. Bishop Langton was one of King Richard's chaplains and spent time with him in the summer of 1483 on his royal progress. Bishop Langton wrote privately, "He contents the people where he goes best, that ever did a prince. For many a poor man that has suffered wrong many days has been relieved and helped by him in his commands in his progress. And in many great cities and towns were great sums of money given him which he has refused. On my troth, I have never liked the conditions of any prince so well as his. God has sent him to us for the welfare of us all. And I am not overlooking the fact that pleasure reigns to some degree." John Rouse. In his illustrated armorial chronicle of the kings and queens of England, compiled during Richard's reign, John Rouse recorded the following for Richard. Rouse was a local cleric in Warwickshire for the Neville family. There is no evidence that Rouse had met Richard. Rouse recorded, "The most mighty Prince Richard, by the grace of God, King of England and of France and Lord of Ireland, by very matrimony without interruption or any defiling of the law, by heir male descending from King Henry II, all avarice set aside, ruled his subjects in his realm full commendably, punishing offenders of his laws, especially extortioners and oppressors of his commons, and cherishing those that were virtuous, by which discreet guiding he got great thanks of God and love of all his subjects, rich and poor, and great praise of all the people of all other lands around him." Pietro Carmeliano. During Richard's reign, a foreign poet in London, Pietro Carmeliano, dedicated a work to King Richard, giving copies to the king and two governmental figures, Robert Brackenbury, Constable of the Tower of London, and John Russell, Bishop of Lincoln and Lord Chancellor of England. There is no contemporary evidence to suggest that Carmeliano had met Richard. Carmeliano wrote, "I found no prince more worthy than him, to whom my work might be dedicated. But lest I should seem to extol his majesty unreasonably, you, personally, wisest of men, will be my witness as to whether I speak the truth or falsehood. If we look for religious devotion, what prince is there in our time who shows a more genuine piety? If for justice, who can we reckon above him throughout the world? If we look for prudence in fostering peace and waging war, who shall we judge his equal? If we look for truth of soul, for wisdom, for loftiness of mind, united with modesty, who stands before our King Richard? What Christian emperor or prince can be compared with him in good works and munificence? To whom are theft, rebellion, pollution, adultery, manslaughter, usury, heresy, and other abominable crimes more hateful than to him? Clearly, no one. Therefore, not without reason, did I dedicate and present my brief work to His Highness." The Mayor and Aldermen of York. You probably will know this one. On the 23rd of August, 1485, the day after Richard's death at Bosworth, and with a new king proclaimed on the battlefield, the mayor and aldermen of York recorded in their records that King Richard was pitilessly slain and murdered, to the great heaviness of this city. Shortly afterwards, they described Richard as the most famous prince of blessed memory. The men of York had known Richard as a man and boy, and made this record when a new authority and enemy of the former monarch was in power. In determining personality, as we have heard, we have also to consider people's actions. So are the descriptions of Richard we have just heard supported by his actions during his lifetime? It seems they are. We have innumerable evidences of which the following, with our limited time today, are only a small selection of examples. These further illustrate Richard's values as Duke and King. Richard acted to ensure justice for ordinary people, and he did this as Duke and King. He enacted progressive laws for ordinary people. He established a number of collegiate churches and supported and gave donations to religious and educational foundations. He read many books, was well read, and supported the book and printing trades. His deep grief is recorded at the death of his brothers, his young son and heir, Edward of Middleham, and his wife and queen, Anne Neville. Also recorded is his personal courage in battle as Duke and King, leading from the front and remembering and honouring those who had fallen on both sides. Dr. Julian Boone is a leading clinical psychologist and the inventor of psychological profiling. You may have seen Dr. Boone's psychological profiling dramatised in the television series Wire in the Blood with Robson Green. In 2012, Dr. Boone analysed what is known about Richard III from the contemporary records from his lifetime as Duke and King, and concluded that he was not of the dark triad, meaning that Richard was not psychopathic, narcissistic, or Machiavellian. Dr. Boone's overall expert view was that Richard was a well-meaning man living in difficult times. Our examination of materials from Richard's lifetime must consider negative comments about Richard. This is important to get as complete a picture as we can. In York on the 24th of June 1482, an inhabitant of the city, a Roger Breer, said of Richard as Duke of Gloucester, What might he do for the city? Nothing but grin at us. In early 1485, when Richard's wife, Queen Anne, was dying, I think as you've heard from Matthew, a rumour arose in London that he wished to murder her and then incestuously marry his illegitimate niece, Elizabeth of York. Richard acted to defend himself and his reputation by publicly dispelling the rumour. It is recorded that he spoke in a loud and distinct voice. The mayor and aldermen of London recorded that the rumour came from evil-disposed persons. These are the negative comments we could find about Richard during his lifetime, other than those from Mancini, as we have heard. We have no information that Breer had met Richard. John Rouse and Pietro Carmeliano would both go on to write negatively about Richard during the Tudor period following his death, with Rouse removing King Richard from the Latin version of his illustrated armorial chronicle. The evidences from Richard's lifetime have allowed the project to conclude that Richard was considered of good repute, and that good reputation was known on the continent. To protect his reputation, he acted publicly to dispel a rumour. He was considered to be someone who was able and earnest, with a quiet, contemplative nature and an apparent mild and pleasant temper, with a great heart. But who could use strong words when the occasion required and speak distinctly in a loud voice? Substantive contemporary materials confirm that Richard was someone who was commonly considered to be loyal, brave, devout, and just. This description is not to make Richard a saint. Every public figure has their supporters and detractors, as we have seen. But this is what is supported by the surviving documentary evidence from his lifetime, with public descriptions corresponding directly with those written privately, and which we have seen today, and offering a probability bordering on certainty of his recognized character during his lifetime. Thomas Dennis, the incredibly talented actor who has helped bring King Richard to life, has brought this evidential Richard to the screen. A Richard you will meet shortly for the very first time. And I don't know about you, but I can't wait. Thomas, where are you in the audience? Oh, you're there. Right. Oh, hey. Hi. Hello. Anyway, thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you.